Binder, and I'm an instructor, a guru in the Filipino martial art of Giron and Escrima, which I've been practicing since 1985. I've been teaching since 1986. My previous background was mostly in Kempo. And what my first instruction in the art was came after being on a Chuck Norris movie as an extra in 1980. And I was introduced to a guy who went by the name of Kip. His name was Bob Flores, who had grown up with Leo Gaihe in the Philippines. And we met through mutual friends, and he taught me a few things. And at that point, my partners, my training partners, and I were trying to figure out how to do this stuff from Dan Inosanto's first book. So, 1982, I had a motorcycle accident. I separated my right shoulder, and I couldn't really use my right arm. So, in Kempo, I'd have to raise my arm and hold on to the gi, spar with one hand and 2 feet. So I had limited range of motion. I couldn't hold my arm out or to the side or touch the top of my head for a long time. So 1985, I'm fighting in a Max Palin tournament down in San Leandro, and during the lunch break they're having demonstrations by several different Filipino martial art groups. And I saw a couple of different things happening, and they didn't match what I learned a few years earlier from this guy from the Philippines. And then they said Angel Cabalas, and my ears perked up because I knew his name from Dan Inosanto's book, and I thought he was dead already. I was real excited. All my buddies were going to lunch. I said, no, I'm staying to watch this. And these guys walked out there, no fancy uniforms, or just t-shirts and sweatpants, and they just salute, bang. And I'm like, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And what I noticed in particular was Angel Cabalas' movement was this. It was very tight, the upper arm to the body. And with my bad shoulder, I said, I can do that. I can do that movement. And so after the demo was over, I said, I'm not going to miss this opportunity. I walked across the auditorium and I introduced myself to Angel Cabalas. And there was a seminar 2 weeks later up in Vacaville. Anthony Davis was at that point getting himself involved with Angel's organization, and he was sponsoring the seminar. So I went up there. It was a 2-day seminar. Carlito Bonjoc was the first person that worked with me, so he was my first instruction in the Filipino art of Giron and Escrima. And David Ma was the other guy I remember working with that weekend. And after the seminar was over, I went over to Angel and I said, I don't want to be a seminar student, I want to learn your art. And Anthony Davis is standing next to him, looks at me and goes, well, this is Anthony, he's my student, he lives closer to you than I do, so go train with Anthony first. So I spent a year training with Anthony Davis, and at that point, Anthony was still training with Angel. So I think I'd gone about as far as Serrata with Anthony as he was able to take me at that point. And he was a good instructor, but that was, at that point, I then transferred over, began coming out to Stockton, training privately with Angel Cabalas, and as time went on, I would also go to the academy after spending the day with Angel, and I would work out with the other practitioners there. These were guys like Sultanuddin, who was still going by his original name of Kimball Joyce at that time, Wade Williams. These were the guys that were kind of the lead practitioners in the academy at that time. Darren Tabone was working on his master's certificate, or starting on his master's at that time. I got my advanced certificate from Angel in December of '87. Wade Williams got his master's certificate the same day, so we were both at Angel's house, got our certificates. And so that was what got me going in it. And again, the art fit me. I liked the simplicity of it. In Kempo, it was like having an encyclopedia and just huge volume of information. But the structure didn't make sense to me, because you might have a technique in one belt and then you wouldn't see a variation of that technique until 2 belts later. So the organization of the material didn't logically fit for me how combat worked. And when I met Angel and I looked at, how he had structured Serrata, all of a sudden everything made sense. Outside, inside, how you handled his different positions. What happened was I went back to my Kempo school, and I was a brown belt at that point. I started reorganizing all of the techniques I'd learned in Kempo, but according to Serrata's concept of the material. And it all started falling together for me there. I remember 6 months after I started Escrima, one of my old training buddies, who was like a magnificent fighter, Ben Polanco, who he'd been a gymnast and he trained with Max Palin for years. I remember one day he said, "You're getting hard to hit. What's different?" I said, "Well, I'm doing Escrima now on the side." And he goes, "No, I'm not talking about sticks, I'm talking about empty hands." I said, "Yes, I'm doing Escrima," but it was the way the material was organized. It changed everything for me. And over time, things shifted, and the Escrima became more important to me than the Kempo. And my early training was invaluable to me because it gave me just lots of information on like how to target and strike and so forth. But I loved the fluidity and the feeling of Filipino martial arts. Another instructor I'll mention at that time, who I also met through Anthony Davis, was John Wong. And he taught Tai Chi up in Sassoon. And so John was 5th degree or higher in 4 systems of Kempo. He trained, with Chow and Emperado. He was married to Ed Parker's niece. So he was deep in it. I mean, he grew up in Hawaii. And John was very good on concepts in martial arts. And he looked at what I was learning from Angel. He hadn't met Angel at that point. They eventually did meet. And he was impressed. He said, "That's a live art. Not a dead art where everything's memorized, but a live art. It's fluid." He said, "You keep training that." And eventually, I trained both John and his wife, Mo, in Serrata in exchange for the Tai Chi training that I was doing. So he was another major influence right at the same time, and he helped me understand how Angel's material was working. So that was a valuable part of it also. So 1989, backtrack, 1988, I went and competed in the first U.S. National Escrima tournament down in San Jose. Alfredo Bondolan organized the tournament, and it was under the Narafil rules at that point. And I fought Arlen Sanford there. Arlen and Eric Naus and Mark Denny are the 3 guys that created the Dog Brothers. And this tournament was where they actually huddled together off on the side and said, "There's got to be another way to do it." So that was the inception of the Dog Brothers at that event. So I fought Arlen. And it was funny because I pulled off, we had the helmets and the padding and jackets. I'd never had the gear on before. So it was really a handicap because I wasn't used to it. And I pulled the jacket off and I had 2 bloody gashes on my arm from Arlen. And he's like, "Oh, I got you good." And he pulled his jacket off. There were 3 bloody gashes. I said, "You outrank me." So that was my introduction to the tournaments. I was never really into tournament fighting, but I looked at it as a reason to see what was working and what I needed to develop. And later that year, I got an invitation to participate on the first U.S. national team going to the Philippines for the inaugural WECAF World Championships. And I'm like, wow, a chance to go and travel to the Philippines and be around people that do the art that I'm falling in love with. So I went over there. I went to the finals in the tournament in Cebu, and then I went to the finals up at another tournament up in Manila, where I actually fought Miguel Zubiri, and that fight got televised on TV in the Philippines, which was kind of cool. It was like tennis matches, and there's Jeff Finder. He has good footwork, and the hushed tones of the announcer. It was years before I saw the video. But it was a really great learning experience just to see, how the state of the arts was in the Philippines, and to realize that everything that was going on in Stockton was at least as good as what I saw over there. I already intuitively knew that, but there was a conception at the time that the Filipino arts in the Philippines were dying. And I went over there, and of course, there were like lots of practitioners, and I met guys like Titania Mastrissimo and Benjamin Lima, Hortensio Navalas, which was interesting because he was from Panay, which was where Cabalas was born. So Cabalas, Navalas, and their style that they did, they used a longer weapon, but they used the lock position of Serrata. So I went over and I chatted him up, and I sort of became a temporary honorary member of their club at the tournament there. And my experience was every fight that I had in the tournaments, I tried to do something a little more. So like the beginning, maybe umbrella block and outside block for two, bread and butter, because they were fast, powerful techniques. I could use them within the rules of the tournament. And then the next fight, as I found myself becoming more comfortable, more and more of what I had learned in the basics of Serrata began coming out. And the other thing, of course, was getting used to equipment. When I fought Arlen Sanford, it was completely unfamiliar. At one point, I remember he grabbed my face mask and twisted it, and I'm looking out the eye hole, and I was like, really confused. But at the beginning, my sense was, with the mask on, all I could see was the inside of my mask. And then, as I got a little more experience, now I'm looking at my opponent, and I'm seeing his mask. And eventually, by the time I was done doing the tournament competition, there was no mask. I'm looking my opponent in the eyes. One of the things that really brought that out was my first fight in Cebu. I'd been practicing disarms for maybe 6 months with my students before I went over there. And there was one particular disarm that Angel did that happened in the tournament. And I remember my opponent kind of hesitated for a moment in front of me. And all of a sudden it was like slow motion. And my hand floated out. And I just ripped the stick out of his hands. And all of a sudden I'm back in real time. I'm like, oh my God, I threw it on the ground. Point. And I watched his eyes get really big, like saucers. I'd never seen anybody's eyes do that before. So it was a real learning experience for me to go through that. I don't see Serrata or Filipino martial arts as a tournament competition-oriented sport, but that the competitions were a stepping stone towards my own development. So, like I said, I've been teaching now for it's close to 30 years, and I run a little program in the Bay Area. I call it Bay Area Serrata Escrima, BASE, because I focus on teaching the basics. I began teaching in 1986 when I was still a student under Anthony Davis. I remember asking Angel Cabalas for permission to start training people, because there was nobody around that I knew of that I could practice with. I said, I need to have training partners. Will you allow me to teach? So even before I had my certification, I was allowed to do that. And then in 1987, Angel came out. He did a seminar at our school in Oakland, School of the White Tiger. It was the Kempo school. And that was to make it an official Cabalas academy. So from 1987 until Angel passed away, I was his official Bay Area representative teaching. We videotaped the whole thing, and I spent years studying that tape because there was so much like little fine detail that Angel would do in his technique that maybe I wasn't mature enough as a martial artist to catch at one point. And then years later I'd look at the footage again and go, oh, that's what he's doing. How is Angel so fast? He would do these strikes. Everyone would do like boutiques, or excuse me, abanicos. And I'd go, but Angel's faster than that. So I would watch the footage over and over, and I realized his stick is disappearing. How is he generating that speed? And I realized on that particular move, he's not just doing abanico, but he'd come around first side, and when you come on this one, he's actually, it's like a boutique, he's snapping it. So the stick is disappearing because it's going forward, but his hand is coming back. And of course, then I realized, okay, now I have to develop the tendon strength in my forearm to handle the kind of power being generated by that snapping movement. Angel was a small guy, 5'2", 110 pounds, but incredibly powerful for his size. He would pick guys my size or larger. He would pick us up to fireman's carry to demonstrate that he could do it. There was one time I was training at Angel's house, and this guy shows up, knocks on the door, and Angel opens it, and it's this huge guy. He's like 6'8", 300 pounds. And he's a retired Stockton police captain. He's telling us, I'm a Zapotec Indian from northern Mexico, and he was like lucha libre, so he was the masked determinator. And he says, you're Angel Cabalas. I've heard so much about you. I want to meet you. He comes in, he puts down a stack of books in his jacket, and they go to shake hands. And all of a sudden, the guy goes, bam, down on the floor as they're shaking hands, and the building shook. And Angel leans over and says something to him, and the guy looks up, and again, the big eyes, terror. And he says something, but I'm a Grandmaster, and he gets up, and a few words are exchanged. He goes, oh, I've got to go. And he leaves, and he left his jacket and the books behind, and he never came back for them. I'm like, Angel, this is some old friend of yours you hadn't seen for years? What just happened here? He goes, no, he tried to crush my hand, so I did like this, a thumb lock. And he slams a guy 3 times his size to the ground. And that's the kind of power that Angel had. It was just amazing. So probably back early in my days of training in Serrata, I saw a flyer for Sonny Umpat. He was doing a seminar at, also I'm blanking his name, Joe. He's got a Kempo and a boxing school, or Kaji Kempo and a boxing school in Hayward. And Sonny was an old friend of his and was doing a seminar there. So I went down there with a guy who was my training partner at the time, Steve Van Manen, and we did the seminar. And at that point, Sonny was doing a lot of the duplicata, double stick. And he had some really unique ways of doing things. Because Sonny was a very thin, lightweight kind of a guy too. He generated tremendous power. And so he had all these techniques of using leverage off of his body, off of the other stick. He had ways of like almost scissoring, where he'd strike one way and come back and strike the other, but using leverage power both ways so he could hit in a very short, compact manner with a lot of power. Later, I got to see Sonny's single stick. I go, oh, that looks a lot like Serrata. And Angel goes, well, yes, if you're going to steal, you steal from the best. And so he and I became friends, and I would go and visit him. Sometimes Greglin Lee, son of James Ian Lee, we'd go over there together, and we would visit. And I never trained formally with Sonny, but every time I went over, he would show me what he was working on. Maybe we'd play a little bit. Back about 1989, I guess it was after I came back from the Philippines, he was working on his Giron, his kicking and foot trapping system. And I was still doing Kempo at that time on a regular basis. And so he'd show me what he did. And I said, well, in Kempo, we have something a little bit similar, trying to achieve the same result. We do it like this. And so we would just play with feet. And that was a good time. But like I said, I never formally trained with him. I later introduced Carlito Bonchock and Wade Williams. I provided their introduction, and then they went on and trained with Sonny. And before Sonny passed away, I knew that Mark Denny had been talking about wanting to do videos of the old masters. And I called Mark Denny up, and I said, if you're going to do Sonny Umpat, you better come up now, because he's got cancer real bad. He's not going to be around for long. So Mark Denny came up, did his interviews for his talks with the Grandmasters, series of tapes, and he interviewed a bunch of Sonny's senior students at that time as well. I miss both these guys. Angel and Sonny are probably my two biggest influences in the Filipino martial arts. Not just for the technique, but for the creativity that they had going forward with this. In terms of my own work, like I said, my program, I call it Bay Area Serrata Escrima, because I was Angel's representative, teaching under his auspices for a number of years. I would bring students out to Stockton to meet him. They would come out and train with him privately and get their certification. So there was a lot of communication going between us at that time. Most of the people that I brought out were, fairly well along in their angles. So, they'd come out to see Angel. Actually, a number of them, he would certify. He'd say, all right, I'll give you 4 lessons and a certificate. And it wasn't because they were beginners, but because the protocol, the teaching that I was doing was how Angel wanted the material to be taught. And so these guys would come out there, and then Angel would call me up and go, yeah, they're good on this, but work on them more on this other thing. And so there was always that feedback. And I learned a lot as an instructor under Angel. I was already teaching under Kempo, so my Kempo teacher, Al Thomas, was a big mentor for my teaching development. John Wong conceptually was a mentor for that, and Angel was a big influence on that as well. I understand a lot of the advanced techniques that people do, and when I play with my guys, things come out, and it's like, it's all about freedom of movement, and whatever happens in the moment, it's all good. But I also look at Angel being a genius at what he was doing. And I certainly don't presume to have that level of experience or combative background. And so when I teach the basics, I try to teach it the way I learned it. And it's a little bit codified in that sense. But within the techniques are the principles and the concepts. And once people understand that, and then we start sparring and we begin to play, anything that works is fair game. I always tell my students, the only mistake you can really make is getting hit. Anything else is better than the alternative.
Okay. No, I don't know. This. You can bring your hand up.
And what that is like, you can use that in the street or whatever without a stop. Right? Say somebody does a punch, like say it's a jab.
Yeah.
It's the same type of idea. This is right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like if you told me to write.
Yeah, it's real similar. That's
yeah.
Like the inside.
Yeah, then here, finish it up.
That's
why I say hand technique.
That's the Grandmasters.
It's real hard to hit.
That's like a kindergarten.
Her? That's why I say you got hit.